Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So today I'll be discussing the topic of how to get a job in tech. So there's primarily three different paths that you can take. Either you can be self-taught, go through a bootcamp, or get a degree. So I recently got a job working for one of the biggest consulting firms in the world as a software developer. So I'll be sharing with you guys that path at the end of the video and what steps I took in order to secure that job, and hopefully you can replicate those steps for yourself. So I'll be discussing the pros and cons of each path that you can take, and then you can decide which path best suits your current circumstances. So without wasting any time, let's get to the first step. First, let's talk about getting a degree in computer science or related field. Number one, structured learning environment. A degree provides a well-structured and comprehensive curriculum. You'll cover fundamental topics in depth, from algorithms and data structures to operating systems and databases. So essentially, they're going to give you everything you need to know about everything computer science related or a specific field. Number two, access to resources. Universities often have extensive resources, including libraries, labs, and access to industry professionals. You can also participate in research and projects and internships. So they will have essentially companies come through to the campus to come teach you certain different things, and usually you find that you have scouts there that are possibly scouting for potential talents at the school. Number three, networking opportunities. College provides ample networking opportunities. You'll meet professors, classmates, and alumni who will help you in your career. So you essentially will have people that can possibly get jobs in certain companies, and those people will connect with you in order to possibly offer you those opportunities in the case that they work for a specific company. In my case, I knew somebody who actually worked for the company that I'm currently working for, and I discussed some opportunities with them if their company has those. Number four, which is the biggest thing about getting a degree, is the credibility. Having a degree adds credibility to your resume. Many employers still prioritize candidates with formal education. That's the reality. So you find that in most cases, some companies actually require you to have a degree in order to qualify for any certain position. In my case, the company that I'm currently working for, they had a degree as one of their prerequisites in order to qualify for that specific position. So if you have that piece of paper, it actually adds a little bit of credibility that you might know your stuff that you're applying for. The cons for getting a degree. Number one, which is the biggest one, cost. So tuition, living expenses, etc. can really add up really quickly, and in most cases, some people end up having to take out student debt, especially if you don't have NSFAS. So you're pretty much gonna be in trouble. So university can be very expensive to get that degree, so sometimes you find that it's not even worth it going through that. I was fortunate enough to get a bursary, so if you can apply for a bursary as early and as quick as you possibly can in order to qualify for that opportunity. Otherwise, you might end up having to work 2 jobs or 3 jobs or 1 job or in order to just qualify, or you might have to end up actually taking a student loan, which isn't nice, isn't a really great start to your career. Con number 2, time consuming. You have to essentially be there for roughly 3 to 4 years in order to get your degree. So this is a lot of time to invest into something, whereas if you're going to be taking another path that we're going to talk about, you find that it's considerably a way much greater investment in terms of time. So if you're eager to quickly start working, you can't do that with the degree. Con number 3 for getting a degree. The curriculum is outdated. So in most cases, you find that we'll be teaching you stuff related to something that happened 2-3 years back, because it takes a lot of money and a lot of investment from the schools in order to actually update their content in order to teach you. So you find that they actually are not keeping up with the latest trends and technologies in most cases. So that's another thing you might have to consider, especially, for example, with my school. I think we're learning Java 8 or something like that. And at the time, I think it was like Java 13. So that's another thing. That's another thing you might have to consider, is that the curriculum is outdated. Now, let's discuss going with the route of a coding bootcamp, right? So the pros for going with a coding bootcamp is that it's a short duration. So bootcamps are essentially intensive and typically last for about a couple of few months. This allows you to enter the job market faster compared to a traditional degree. So they essentially teach you a lot very quickly, very fast. So some boot camps that I've seen take about 3 to 6 months in order for you to get a job, and some of them actually guarantee you a job at the end, because you find that they have partnerships with certain companies where certain companies just come there to scout talent for their work environments. For example, I think We Think Code has a couple of partnerships with a wide number of companies. So you find that companies actually go there to scout new talent. Pro number 2 is that focused learning. Bootcamps are designed to teach practical skills that are directly applicable to the job market. You'll work on related real world projects and build a portfolio. So they will essentially make you build web applications, mobile apps, or things like that that you can put on your resume that you can use to apply for jobs, which is great. And also you are now familiarized with the working environment by collaborating with possible teammates and things like that. Now, pro number 3 is cost effective. While not cheap, bootcamps are generally more affordable than 4-year degrees, because you find that, for example, one of the bootcamps I've seen was 60,000 Rand, which is essentially 1 year's full tuition, and at the end, you're possibly guaranteed a job. So the cons for going with a bootcamp is that, number 1, limited depth. So in most cases, due to the fact that these courses are very short in terms of duration, bootcamps may not cover foundational concepts in much depth as such as a degree. So for example, they might not go too in detail about algorithms or data structures or things like that. They're possibly just going to give you the bare minimum that's enough to actually get you job ready. Okay, so con number 2 is intensity. Because a bootcamp is such a short period of time, they essentially have to feed you as much information as they possibly can. So you find that they require a significant amount of time commitment during that period, and you have to balance responsibilities and other challenges in your life with that bootcamp, and you are pretty much going to be pushed to your limits. So usually you find that they're not really to everybody's taste, because you can't spend too much time trying to understand certain things. They're just trying to get you out the door. Con number 3 is that variable quality. Some bootcamps aren't as great as other bootcamps, or their courses aren't as great as other courses. So you have to do a lot of research in order to guarantee that you are going to get the value for your money and you are going to a really, really good bootcamp. Okay, so now let's talk about the self-taught route, which is, I think, typically one of my favorite routes to take. But like, I think it's like one of my favorite routes to take if you are gonna implement it with maybe another path. For example, I implemented the self-taught route with a degree at the same time, which pretty much gives you one of the best opportunities ever. I was able to get a job much quicker before I even graduated, because I was self-taught already with certain skills, and I was able to learn, which I think at the core of being in the tech space, you have to be self-taught. Number 1, you have to always know how to teach yourself things, and you have to be dedicated to being a lifelong learner. The pros for taking the self-taught route is that, number 1, flexibility. Being self-taught allows you to learn at your own pace and on your own schedule. You can focus on areas that interest you the most. So you essentially can choose whichever path you would prefer. So be it web development, mobile app development or any other type of development that you might be prefer, data science or whatever, without having to focus on other areas compared to, let's say, a degree, which teaches you pretty much everything to do with computer science, and at the end, you are not specializing in anything. You can essentially go into being a developer for anything you want after a degree, and you have to learn to specialize in what you want. So pro number 2 is costs. So learning resources are abundant and often free to low cost. Online courses, tutorials, and open source projects are a great starting point. So you have essentially what you are watching this video on right now, YouTube, with thousands and thousands of courses that are free that you can watch to learn to specialize in something that you might be interested in. And you also have platforms such as Udemy, Coursera, and Free Code Camp, W3 schools that are essentially free, or their courses cost probably just a burger's worth of a meal that you can sign up for and buy courses in order to learn and to specialize in anything. So for example, one of my favorite platforms that I used to use is, or I still use essentially, is Udemy. You can buy a course on sale for roughly $200, and you can essentially learn so much information. For example, I've bought the Angela Yu web developer course, the Python Bootcamp. I bought one for Java by Team Bullock. I've learned so many different things from Travis Media and different things. So there's plenty of resources online that are free for you to use. And yeah, so there's literally no reason for you not to be self-taught. Okay, pro number 3 is real world experience. By working on personal projects, you gain practical experience and you can build a portfolio to showcase your skills to potential employers, right? So when you're self-taught, one of the biggest things I always advise is that you work on a big project that whatever you think is impossible, you think about that and you try to build it. Even if it's Amazon or whatever, you work on building that project. And it has to be a CRUD application if you want to be a web developer or mobile app developer, right? So it has to literally be so good, and you work on that project and you adapt and you add features to it continuously. Usually you find that working on that one big project that ends up possibly going public, and you can build your project in public. That's what I usually advise, is that if you're building something that's like your side hustle or whatever, share it on Twitter with people, or Instagram or YouTube or whatever, and then you find that usually one person might scout you based off of that. But also, because of that one big project that you've built that's actually impressive, you can essentially use it to convince employers that you know what you're doing. And usually, for the most part, if you've built a CRUD application, you have essentially built what your job is going to be requiring you to do, for the most part, right? You pretty much have skills that are enough to get you that job. Number 4, adaptability. Self-taught learners often develop strong problem-solving skills and adaptability, which are highly valued in the tech industry. So that's what I was talking about, is that if you are self-taught, you are essentially someone who is willing to learn on their own, which is a skill that every employer requires. Someone who's willing to be open-minded enough to learn a new skill at any point, at any time. So if you're self-taught, chances are it's going to be very, very easy for you. If an employer says we're changing from this stack to another stack, it's going to be very easy for you to be like, okay, that's fine, we can do that, you know? So it's very, very important that you essentially build the ability for you to actually pre-program your mind that you are actually self-taught at all times. You are self-taught, regardless of whether you get a boot camp or you go to a degree. You are self-taught, and you have to be a lifelong learner regardless. Okay, so now let's discuss the cons of going with the self-taught route. Con number 1, lack of structure. Without a structured curriculum, it can be challenging to know what to learn and in what order. You might miss out on essential foundational concepts. So that's a very tough thing to do, is that usually you find that you get overwhelmed by what you need to do, what you need to learn, because you don't have any mentors or somebody to guide you in order to show you what you need to do. So that's one of the biggest problems with going the self-taught route. I remember trying to build some project and I didn't have any idea of where to start and how to do it. And you spend a lot of time in things like tutorial help because you don't even know what to do. You're just trying to learn to continue without actually implementing anything. So that's one of the biggest problems with going with the self-taught route, is that there's a lack of structure and you don't know what to do. So one of the biggest advices that I can give you is that it helps a lot to get somebody who is where you want to be and get their advice and get their mentorship in order to do the right things and follow the right steps to get to where they are. Okay, number 2, motivation. Staying motivated and disciplined can be difficult without the accountability of a formal program. So you are essentially, because you don't know what to do, because there's a lack of structure, you find that you spend a lot of time trying to motivate yourself, and in most cases you are going to run out of motivation, and it's purely just going to be discipline to keep moving forward in order to get to where you want to be. So for the most part, I'd say do not rely on motivation, but instead rely on discipline and stick with the goal that you want to achieve, and you'll get where you want to be. Number 4, job market perception. Some employers might prioritize candidates with formal education or bootcamp experience over self-taught individuals. So that's another thing you have to consider, is that some companies actually prefer somebody with that piece of paper, right? Rather than somebody who has been self-taught. So as a self-taught candidate, you have to do more in order to prove yourself worthy of being in that position, right? So which is why you have to build more projects and you have to do more in order to prove yourself, right? Luckily, the number 1 benefit of being self-taught is that because you are self-taught, right, you have a shorter time frame, which is one of the pros that you have, is that you have way more flexibility on how long you spend learning something. So if you want to be a web developer, you can literally spend 3 months, and then after 3 months or 4 months of learning or 6 months of learning, you can essentially start applying for jobs, whereas somebody who's doing a degree cannot apply for those jobs up until like 2 or 3 years later with that piece of paper, right? So you have a shorter time to market than somebody who's essentially getting a degree. So you have a lot of time to actually like sharpen your skills and prove yourself worthy of getting that job. So sometimes it's going to be a reality that some people ask that, do you have a degree? But sometimes, man, it doesn't really matter. Even if they say they put a degree on the job listing, just apply regardless. Does not matter. Just apply. That's the reality. Okay, so how did I get my current position, right? So for my current position, I essentially utilized 2 things: my degree and my self-taught experience. So because I already had a job before I got this new job. The job that I was working for before, I was a developer. I started working for that company before I even graduated. So I already had some experience, which is 2.5 years of experience as a developer. And then I also had my self-taught experience, some projects that I had worked on. So I utilized those skills in order to get this new position. Because the new position that I'm working at, I'm a full stack web developer for the most part. For the most part. So my web development skills that I already had when I was self-taught were utilized in order to get this position. For example, one of the main skills that they required was either an Angular or a React developer. So luckily, I had already built a very big project previously using React. So I had a lot of React experience, even though in my previous position, I was not even a React developer whatsoever. So what steps did I take in order to get the position? So number 1, I was already in the mindset of I'm looking for a new job. So I went on LinkedIn, applied for a lot of different positions, updated my resume on LinkedIn, and also updated my actual resume with different job experiences and different projects that I've worked in previously. So things like your hackathons. For example, in my previous job, I utilized pretty much everything I've done as a self-taught developer. So hackathons, etc., all of those different things, put them in your resume. Your different projects that you've worked in, put them in your resume, because for the most part, some of the things, like for example, I see people putting in things like worked as a waitress or whatever, worked as a waiter when you're applying for a tech job. For the most part, that experience does not matter. So you're essentially just wasting your time. The only thing you can actually utilize in that position when you don't have an experience is to utilize projects. That's essentially it. So I had a website with some of my projects. I'm not even sure if it's still up. Actually, it is still up. I will just put it here on screen. That's what I had. And yeah, so you essentially have to prove yourself more through hackathons, projects. Those are your two biggest differentiators for you. So yeah, so I already had that, updated my resume with new projects and new experiences that I have. And then after that, applied on LinkedIn to many different listings, regardless of whether I felt I met the criteria or not. So some positions, they'll put you and say they want 5 years or 7 years of experience, still apply. It does not matter unless something is like a senior position. And then if it's a senior position, for the most part, you find that they're requiring certain skills that as a junior, you probably don't even have, right? For example, right now, I'm essentially like a mid engineer, right? I'm a mid engineer, so I'm pretty much close to that senior level in no time. We're on our way there, right? So senior positions, I would highly advise you stay away from those because they are gonna put you straight into the deep end. Whereas if you're like new, an intern position or junior position or grad position aren't so bad. So I would say that if you are a new graduate, right, apply for grad programs if you can, or apply for internships, or apply for junior positions if you are a new grad. And then if you are someone who's an experienced person, then I'd advise for junior positions, mid positions, or just go senior if you are obviously that experienced. So, or if you are let's say somebody who's like they've just not graduated yet, but they still have like another year or two to finish working, I would not advise you do what I did, which is getting a job in advance before you even graduate, because I did that because I thought that when I graduate, I do not want to have to wait in order to get a new job. I don't want to be stressed out about that. So I thought that was a smart idea, but in reality, it was not really smart because you end up not performing that well at school because you're juggling two things at once. And I was working full-time while schooling full-time, so that was not really a smart choice, was it? So I would not advise that. So you have now polished up your resume and you know what position you want to apply for. I would say go on LinkedIn, go on PNet, and also think about the companies you want to work for, right? So if you want to work for Standard Bank, you want to work for F&B, you want to work for Investec, you want to work for Bootcamp, MTN, Cellc, Telkom, Takealot, all of these different companies, go directly on the company's website and apply from there. Look for job listings because most of these companies are usually actively hiring, so they will always have some sort of position opened up and they want to hire you for different projects or whatever, right? So I would say go on the website directly and apply from there. And also, even using recruiting companies, there's recruiting companies that you can apply to, right? Because they will list a position, for example, on LinkedIn for another client. So you can apply to those people and then they will actually like recommend you to other clients. But it's a bit harder if you don't have experience. So yeah, look out for that. Like for example, platforms like OfferZen, they usually work really well with experienced candidates, because if you don't have experience, they are very, very brutal, because you'll get rejected no matter what you try. I remember trying to apply to Offazan and they turned me down. So I never went back again, because that rejection was very, very sad, because I thought they would help me out, but they didn't. That's sad. So they're usually looking for experienced candidates, and also they're looking for like skills that are in demand. So if you're like a Python developer, but the skill that's in demand is JavaScript or TypeScript or whatever type of developer or Java developers, then they're pretty much going to reject you as well, right? Because companies have subscriptions for those companies, so they're hiring based on demand. I would say apply to those companies directly. That's what I did. I applied directly on my company's website, and that's how I got my position, right? Because you find that by applying directly on the website, you will have a recruiting person from the company find you a position and fight for you to work for that company, right? So they will essentially be the one to even recommend you another position if you don't get the position that you're looking for. They might say, hey, look, I see you apply for this position, but I actually have another opening for this other position, and then they can recommend you for that, and then you get a job through that way too, right? So you are gonna, because you are in the tech space, you are probably gonna have a technical interview, a non-technical interview, and I will advise you this: always prepare for your interviews. The reality is, the way you present yourself at an interview either makes or breaks you getting that job, right? You need to present yourself way better than any other candidates, regardless of whether you have the skills or not. Because some people make this mistake that you have the skills, but then you can't actually present yourself the right way, even though you have the skills. So you need to be able to talk yourself through those interviews and actually present yourself the best way that you possibly can. So I will, if you want me to make a video discussing how you can pass your interviews, just comment down below and I'll be sure to make that video for you. What I would advise right now is that look at your circumstances, consider everything, costs, the time you have, responsibilities, etc. Whether you're trying to shift from one industry to another industry, and consider every possibility that you can, consider every circumstance that you're in, and then choose which path best suits you. Which path would I recommend you take? I would recommend, if you are someone who has a bursary, I highly recommend going to get that degree. If you are someone who just finished high school but then does not have the money to afford going to school, I would recommend going through a boot camp, but research your boot camp properly so you find a very, very good boot camp. I'd recommend going to a boot camp, learning for those 3 to 6 months, and then getting a job. But then if you are someone who is looking to change from one industry to another industry, I would recommend going through the self-taught or bootcamp route, because bootcamps can also be adaptable to circumstances. So for example, you can do an online bootcamp where you go there, where it's going to take maybe an additional 6 months or 12 months in order to complete, but at the end you still get that job guaranteed. So I'd recommend, if you're trying to switch industries, I would highly recommend just going through the self-taught route, because you already have some skills that you can leverage off of. Okay, so that was it, guys. I'm pretty sure there's a lot that I probably missed out on, but feel free to comment down below and I'll answer any questions on my next video. So cheers, guys. Until then, see you on the next video. Peace.